South Africa says it is relaxing controversial travel rules that many believe have damaged the country's tourism industry. Home Affairs Minister Malusi Gigaba says the changes would be introduced next month. The raft of new regulations will allow frequent visitors and foreign business travelers to have long-term multiple entry visas of up to 10 years. Visa requirements for countries such as China and India will also be simplified, and foreign families will no longer have to produce their children's unabridged birth certificates when coming into South Africa. The visa reforms are part of an economic stimulus plan announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Tourism contributes 10% of South Africa's total gross domestic product. Well, CGTN's Angelo Coppola is in Johannesburg for us with more on this developing story. Angelo, let's start with a list of countries that will enjoy less bureaucracy from South Africa when they visit. Who are those countries?
Well, look, there are 19 of them in all, but before we get too excited, Minister Gigaba did say that discussions were being finalized to arrange that visa-free travel for those 19 countries. So there's no timeline was placed on when the actual visa-free travel would begin. Obviously, the local tourist industry is hoping that it happens sooner rather than later. The development or the issue really is going to be, the devil is going to be in the detail. And unless there have been substantive talks that have happened behind the scenes, this could take some while to happen. But in no particular order, the countries involved are Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, Sao Tome and Principe, Tunisia, Ghana, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Palestine, Iran, Lebanon, Bahrain, Oman and Kuwait. Then there's also Belarus, Georgia and Cuba. Beatrice?
So how much exactly has tourism generated for South Africa's economy since the laws were changed? And Angelo, what was the reason behind enforcing those previously tough laws in the first place?
Well, look, tourism in South Africa is a really big revenue generator and a job creator. On average, it's estimated that each tourist that comes to the country, that's a foreign tourist, spends around $900 per visit. And there were around 10 million foreign tourists here last year. That's just under $9 billion in revenue alone, even with those restrictive rules in place. There's also around 750,000 direct jobs that are linked to the tourism sector. So the impact of the restrictions or excessive paperwork on minor travel, we understand, also saw some 13,000 families being turned away at our borders or at the plane when they were coming to South Africa because they didn't have complete documentation. The minors were being monitored because, according to Gigaba's department, they wanted to reduce human and child trafficking. Of course, at the moment, as we understand it, there's no data that has been released just yet showing whether that approach taken by the Home Affairs Department was successful or not. And it's not just the minors that were affected or that affected the tourism sector. There's also that in-person visa application process that was installed in China and India, and that saw thousands of prospective tourists turned away. It didn't help, of course, that South African embassies were only in the capital cities. Again, the experts are unclear as to why that was introduced in the first place. But we do know that it caused a significant tourist drop. In fact, in the case of China, the Chinese tourist market dried up almost overnight. Beatrice?
So this move is obviously part of President Ramaphosa's bid to stimulate the rather sluggish South African economy. Is there a turnaround time for this stimulus to start showing results?
Well, look, it is correct. It is part of the overall package. But just days after President Ramaphosa announced those measures, in fact, he announced them on Friday, there's at least one ratings agency, Fitch, which came out earlier today saying it was not impressed at all by the overall package, saying that the latest plan is unlikely to deliver a significant boost to economic growth. In fact, they also indicated that their downgraded economic growth forecast remains where it is, which they also released last week. Tourism, of course, was likely considered to be one of the low-hanging fruits, and that's probably what the economic cluster ministers were saying to the president. Experts exclude the tourism minister Hanekom there because he understands that the tourism sector works in long life cycles of around 18 months. That's the time it takes to get all the brochure work together, to get it out into the marketplace, and for the tourists then to make any kind of decision. So there's an issue here that the timelines are quite extended, and it's unlikely that we'll see tourism contribute in the short term. Of course, they're hoping to catch That's the government hoping to catch some of the tourists looking for some place to go during the festive season in December. We're yet to see whether that's going to have any kind of impact. So it's a little murky at the moment, Beatrice.
Well, Angelo, very briefly, and back to the relaxation of the travel laws, how soon do you think they will take effect?
Well, look, the discussions around the visa-less countries haven't been finalized yet. We're waiting to hear. We aren't sure either where that process is in the whole discussion point there. There was a vague mention made that a travel advisory would be issued by the Department of Home Affairs by the end of October. We do know that the multi-entry visas for China and India could probably happen sooner rather than later. There's only one potential fly in the ointment there, and that's a commitment that Home Affairs have made that they can turn around those multi-year visas in 5 days. That's with approval and the documentation sent back to the person who's applying to come into South Africa. So there's a bit of skepticism around that timing. We do know that the minor travel documentation restrictions will be lifted sooner rather than later, but the issue really here is the immigration agents can stop a family from coming into South Africa at their own discretion. So it's been advised that those families looking to come to South Africa keep those documents with them just in case they bump into an immigration agent who might be a little more difficult than he's supposed to be. Beatrice?
All right, Angelo Coppola for us there in Johannesburg. Thank you.